group of friends, but there is some queerness in it. But I see them and also other people I've met who are like 5, 6 years younger than me going like, oh, I never really had to come out. It was just obvious, and I'm good here and whatever. And I'm like, great, that is great for you, but I do think it took the coming out of generations, ours and others before us, for you to get to this point. So I think it's sad when people go like, oh, the whole coming out thing is like not necessary. I'm like, no, maybe it's now becoming unnecessary in certain spaces, in certain families, in certain cultures or whatever, because there have been decades and decades and probably centuries of that being necessary.
Trying to box our sexual identity based on what society will understand.
Exactly.
If you didn't have to come out, you wouldn't have to say I'm gay or bisexual, then you could be into whatever you're into. Yes. But because when you grow up you have to like put these in like these little boundaries, then you also I think in some way force yourself into like, cool, I'm gay and that's where I'll stay now.
It's almost like we take the labels to kind of explain what we think we're feeling in that moment. I thought I was a full-on lesbian, and for a long time I was like, I don't want to go near a man or a person with a penis or anything. I was just like, I just want this. And then as I started to like have realizations about my gender identity, it's like I freed myself of that label that I had found so much, I don't know, like safety in, that then I was like, oh, actually I'm biased. And then I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm gay. And then I was like, I don't know where I sit. And now I very much identify as bi or pan or however you want to put it, because I feel like the labels have been there for me almost as like stepping stones towards where I fit and what I was able to handle at that moment. For the first like 5 years of my first queer relationship, I was like, I'm not gay, I'm completely straight, it's just this one person, I promise. And then eventually became comfortable enough to go, and then I had to have basically a sexual experience with another queer person to go like, oh, I think this is actually who I am. And then I was like, wow, I'm gay. And then I leaned so far, I was the rainbow wearing, like, I leaned so far into it, I was like, I'm gay, I'm gonna like, I tend to, when I come out, go like, I'm gonna go balls to the walls with this, because I don't know how else to kind of deal with it, basically. And then coming out as trans, I was like, oh, now it's like I'd come out to my parents as lesbian, and then a million years later it was like, okay, I'm coming out as trans, and then I was like, and Mom, I think I also want to f*** men, and she was just like, I don't understand. she nearly fell off her bed. She was just like, what?
I've never been one to like the flag and like go and just be, but it's because I think of the fear of that word gay. I mean, even now, like when someone asks are you gay, I'm like, I actually don't associate with that just because I don't. Like, I can't wait for a place in the future where we get to a point where that is off the table. Like, we're not even asking these fucking questions. But I hate to have to be boxed as gay, because that comes with something, and that meaning has a history for me.
I see that out there, I am that, I relate to that, and then you feel like, okay, cool, I belong. But the label can also go like, if you are not this type of gay, particularly I think with gayness.
You have to stick within the parameters of that label.
If I'm not identifying with all those things, then am I really gay? But you don't have to qualify your gayness.
Because labels create like a sort of box. And with that box, there are parameters. You don't go outside of it, you stick within that because that's what you think is by definition correct.
I have a love-hate relationship with it, because I see like how community has been built around labels, and I love that part of it. But then I also go like, we within the community go like, oh, you're a bottom, okay, you're like this, and you're lesbian, you're like this, you're trans, you're like this, and we box ourselves within the community, which makes me wonder if it's just like a human instinct to try and understand something, and then we use language to define something and actually limit it. I had a weird experience on Grindr the other day. Trigger warning, it's transphobic. But I went on Grindr for the first time in a couple of weeks, and I don't get the notifications until I go on. And the first message that popped up was, if you like your you're a straight woman. And I was like,
Oh my word.
Okay,
close the app like that. I just opened it and I was like, oh, okay, bye, I'm gone. And then it's so I was like, you are queer, you are on Grindr, and you have that level. I expect on Grindr, but that I was like, how are you here, and how are you not aware of the rest of your community enough that that's your go-to? You just saw me and decided like, let me tell you, and I was like,
I mean, I think
What makes you think?
What made you do that?
I think it's built.
You know,
It's built into insecurity.
completely, yeah.
It comes from
or maybe
insecurity.
even one's own internalized queerphobia or transphobia.
Exactly.
Like,
You can't deal with your own, therefore you
Exactly.
project to make it acceptable for what you're doing,
exactly.
which is ish.
Yeah.
Also, people's inability to understand stuff end up being that.
Yes, exactly.
Like the general thing of why should queer people have a coming out story? Straight people, bisexual people don't, so why do you? And then I thought about it 2 days ago, and to each his own, which I respect. But for me, my coming out story was very important for me as a stepping stone in me discovering and accepting who I am. And with my coming out story, when I say that it's like to my mother, when I came out to her, it created a sense of liberation. Coming out was very important to me. It created a sense of liberation, self-worth. Finally, people can respect me, and a space of belonging.
Yeah.
When I came out, all my dad knew was this random gay guy in his like little small town. But after this, his understanding of what gay culture means and what queer culture means has shifted.
Broadened, yeah.
It's broadened, and also in other aspects of his life, where he's become more open to talk about other stuff, open to talk about sex. From a conservative Indian household,
It does everyone else a favor.
it does everyone else a favor because it's so hectic coming out
Yeah.
that it then forces them to deal with other topics of sex, opposed to just saying use a condom to talk about sex.
Exactly.
To talk about my dad's sexual experiences in life without it being like, I can't talk about
Exactly,
it.
exactly. So, like, I have a 19-year-old sibling, and I see her friends and stuff, and she's in a very like straight group of friends, but there is some queerness in it. But I see them and also other people I've met who are like 5-6 years younger than me going like, oh, I never really had to come out. It was just obvious, and I'm good here and whatever. And I'm like, great, that is great for you, but I do think it took the coming out of generations, ours and others before us, for you to get to this point. So I think it's sad when people go like, oh, the whole coming out thing is like not necessary. I'm like, no, maybe it's now becoming unnecessary in certain spaces, in certain families, in certain cultures or whatever, because there have been decades and decades and probably centuries of that being necessary.
My mother almost came out to the public for me without me asking, and it also was irritating.
Interesting.
She went to my school and she's like, listen, Blythe has come out to me. If there's any issues at this school about this, there's going to be and I'm like, then I got to school and there was like a whole big thing. They called me and they're like, don't worry. I'm like, what?
My mom she was like, I think when I came out as trans to her, she took it really hard for a while, and I had to do a lot of like convincing that I'm still the same person.
Yeah.
I think she thought she was losing something, which I think is quite a common response for parents of trans people, but she really took it hard. And then in one of her attempts to be supportive, she went out and she met someone. It was before I was on testosterone yet, like just before. And she went out and she told someone she met that she had a trans daughter because she didn't have the language right yet.
Oh, okay.
And so this complete stranger was like, oh, amazing that you have a trans daughter. And then she came home and she was like, I told this person that I have a trans daughter, and it was amazing to come out to them. I was like, well, that person has completely the wrong idea now because you got the words wrong. But it was a very sweet like attempt at going like, okay, I'm gonna come out as a parent of a trans person, but I don't yet have the research and the language for it.
If you're gonna stereotype gay people and be like, oh, you're not that sort of gay, or speak about gay, I have such a short fuse for that. Or they ask a dumb question with like, oh, but you guys have two men, so then how does it work? I'm not.
How do you have sex?
How does it
And that's
work?
not a cliche. I literally mean it right now in like 2020. Somebody will ask that.
Of course.
I don't have time for that because also
I remember when I came out as lesbian and I was dating this girl. She was wonderful, and then this relative, like family relative, just like, okay, so now who's the man and who's the...
Who wears
I
the
was
pants?
like, I don't have time for this.
That speaks to a more toxic,
Heteronormative.
heteronormative thing that even straight people have with themselves.
100%.
Yes.
Like, have you not felt your own body?
Yeah.
It's so bad.
But I get what you mean when you say that, like, if someone's intention is good, you give them the time of day. But you can even feel, like, as Kira was saying, like, if it's just coming from, like, an idea of stereotypes, or if it's just coming from a place of, like, I don't understand it and I want to press some buttons, that isn't good intention.
Yeah.
Then I don't give that time. Whereas if someone is really trying to understand, part of me, and maybe this isn't even their reality, but part of me goes like, maybe you're queer or maybe you're trans. And if on the off chance that is the case, I will answer any question you have. Especially leading up to realizing I was, first of all, gay, I was definitely homophobic. And it was particularly towards what I think I knew I was, which was butch lesbian. So I was like, I mean, I'm like 12 at this point, but I was like, and I'd learned these things, but I was like, okay, you can be lesbian as long as you're a lipstick lesbian, but if you're a butch lesbian, ew, that's gross. Yeah. And then I was like, okay, now I've realized I'm lesbian, I better be a lipstick lesbian. And then I worked into this idea of femininity for years, thinking like, okay, if I'm lesbian, I have to be this way. And I think that's sort of slowed down my process of realizing I was trans. And then I was really glad that when I realized I was trans, I didn't do the same thing and become transphobic. I mean, there's learned transphobia in everything we do, but I didn't double down. Whereas when I was a kid, I doubled down on butch lesbians or dykes or whatever, because I thought like, oh my gosh, I see myself there. I have to hate it or else I'm going to be it. And that became really real for me as a teen, like as a young teenager. And that's
Yeah, I also like today what people mostly get wrong is the difference between gender identity and gender expression.
Exactly.
So, because I'm wearing makeup,
now you think,
you know?
Yeah.
And that is, so if I'm going to come tomorrow with a chino and a button shirt and some...
Now suddenly your whole gender identity must change.
like, you know? And I find it so
really
annoying.
Yeah. And it's weird in the non-binary space as well. Doing things that affirm my gender identity, I can express my gender in a much more fluid way than I ever did before. And I'm loving it. Like now, putting on makeup now is exciting for me. Or like dressing a certain way now is exciting for me. When before I was just like, oh, I guess I'm supposed to do these things in order to be considered what I'm being read as.
I have exactly the same experience. It was so bizarre for me because I don't know, just in the way that my identity or that I had constructed it or perceived to construct it.
Yeah.
It was very interesting for me, like being on hormones for a particular time and then suddenly, to a particular degree, passing as cis.
Yeah. And then going like, wait, I still want these things. But I still want to play here.
I revel in the moments where I'm able to express these masculine aspects of myself.
Or you can be butch and it's great.
And it's so... I don't know, like I feel like I'm so much more rooted in my masculinity now as a trans woman than I ever was before.
And that is 100% my experience as well.
And it's so weird, like I don't know how to articulate that to people.
Yeah.
That there's... Like we've been taught to like value very skewed things.
Yeah.
And like broadly those things that I've noted that we have become like we're taught to value power.
Yeah.
So people who have like intellectual prowess, people who are more attractive, people who are
wealthy,
more educated, more wealthy.
Yeah.
So all of those things speaks to like degrees of power within whatever sphere you're talking about.
That status
and so we were taught to value that and we were taught to be attracted to do those things.
And
so
to
those are things
aspire
that we aspire to. And so
because
suddenly when you find yourself in spaces when you find yourself in
Success.
spaces with people who are not as educated, people who are not as wealthy, people who are not as whatever, suddenly there's a value system attributed to that. And then we value those people less than we value other people.
Exactly.
And that is a fundamental problem in where we place our values.
And the problem is it's not even stated up front.
No, not at all.
You could find yourself in this area by mistake, and automatically those values and those borders are set without you thinking, right, we're gonna put
you have to actively work against it.
It's like built into it, and this is the way we think. It's like we sit at the table, we eat the same, we breathe the same, we have the same passions, we have the same
those common denominators are very important.
Very
Even though you might think it's really small,
but
it matters.
I think it's just a realization of what I once thought would be unachievable or unobtainable is not that it wasn't, it's just that it was going to come to be anyway. I don't know, it's just like,
I have
if
a
that makes
question
sense.
for you, if I may. you.